Listening to these words, yesterday someone said to me, however, it seems as if everything is referring to today, as if everything we are hearing, proclaimed 2,000 years ago, is being fulfilled today. And well, in fact it is so. As far as the story has gone throughout history, so many are the events described here that have happened. In fact, Jesus with an interweaving of words referred to several moments, near, proximate to him and distant moments, pertaining to today's times. But I would like to focus on these, because what is past is past. Now we must open well the eyes of the heart, to be able to understand, discern good from evil and understand the signs of the times that propel us toward the fulfillment of every promise of God. We could say that the passage heard is the Apocalypse of Luke. And this passage with greater detail is then also taken up by John in his Apocalypse. There is a perfect assonance between these words and what is written in that book, Apocalypse, that means revelation. Revelation concerning what would happen in the last times. In these times. In those hard and in difficult times for humanity. Like the ones we are living today. They ask Jesus a question when Jesus speaks of that temple that would have collapsed. And they ask him, when will all these things will happen? And Jesus answers with an answer that must make reflect, because he says, be careful not to be deceived. So he connects the deception to the temple. Which temple? Certainly the reference is not only to the temple of Jerusalem, that would have been destroyed 70 years after Christ. But here there is a reference that goes far beyond, and is explained by St. Paul in one of his letters, the letter to the Thessalonians. When with reference to deception, he says, let no one deceive you in any way. For first the apostasy must come, and the unrighteous man must be revealed, the son of perdition. He who opposes and rises above every being, who is called God, or is the object of worship, up to sitting in the temple of God, posing himself as God. Then will be revealed the ungodly, and the Lord Jesus will destroy him with the breath of his mouth and annihilate him at the appearance of his coming. And so be condemned, all those who have not believed the truth, but they have given way to iniquity. We, however, must always give thanks to God, because God has chosen us as the first fruits for salvation, through the sanctifying work of the Spirit and faith in the truth. Therefore, St. Paul makes it clear, in a way even clearer, how this deception would take place. A deception that would see iniquity even sit on the throne of God, and that he would point to himself as God. But those who instead would have remained faithful to the truth of the gospel, to the truth that is Christ, would be saved. This is what is happening today, where in a house, iniquity has taken over. Where in a house, one is demolishing the true Christian doctrine, and is teaching a doctrine that does not belong to Christ, which is another religion. We are not the ones who have changed religion. We are loyal to the true religion. We are faithful to the teachings of Jesus. For this reason the Lord said to Mary Josephine, here in this cradle of love, the purity of the faith will always be guarded. And here the Lord wanted to erect his temple. A living temple, a new temple. That's why he said, in a revelation still, every sinner who converts is a wall that I erect in my city. My city that is almost ready, and that shines, and will shine always more, by attracting many who will come from every part of the world. For this the Lord still said, here I wanted my image, to imprint my face. In your hearts, before too late you would discover the deception. Here is the image of the infant God, of the child God, that was and is imprinted in all the hearts that with simplicity and goodwill, come in front of this cradle, and welcome into themselves the smile of the infant God. That smile that gives joy. That smile that gives the impetus. That smile that gives vivid enthusiasm. That smile that gives strength. The strength to face everything and everyone. The strength to raise their heads and to move forward in this world, despite the many difficulties, in the awareness that God, that Christ, love made person, wanted to turn his gaze on us. He wanted to bend down, once again, on his children. He wanted to extend his hands to us again. Let's take these hands. Let's hold them tightly to our hearts. Never leave them, because these hands will lead us to live salvation. The world collapses, a house collapses, but those who will remain anchored and will live this house, that is the house of God, will live for eternity. Let's remain faithful to the truth. To that spirit of truth that had been announced and which has descended here today, in this time in which the lie is rampant elsewhere, and is taking the upper hand where no one ever would have expected. We remain united to this truth. That we understand makes vibrate our heart, and bring us to every word, flowed from the heart of the Father and from the heart of the Son, making us understand how everything today is being realized of what had been said. Here is the great grace, the infinite grace that we have received. And that we cannot only keep for ourselves, but we have to be ready to share it with everyone. With the whole world. With all those we meet. By going to meet everyone and bringing the smile of the baby Jesus. Bringing love in a world where unlove advances. Because of who unfortunately has abandoned true love and did not counteract the unlove. And did everything for the unloved to advance. And here we have come to this time, in which violence, hatred, war, are raging everywhere. Fractious wars, wars of all kinds that see the death of innocents, of children, and of all those of whom are often true victims that don't deserve all that of which is being lived. Because man has become worse than animals. He has become similar to beasts, he no longer listens to God. He no longer listens to the call of God. He did not want to listen to the call that the Lord has also made through his envoys. He did not want to listen to the call of the Mother of God. And we have reached this point. Here then nature also rebels against man. And at God's command, makes here his roar, his strength. But God's children must not fear of everything that happens, will happen. Because what is written will have to be fulfilled to the last comma. The children of God must be proud of belonging to God. And in spite of everything that happens in the world, must be able to look up and praise one's own Lord, live their own Lord. And bring to everyone the testimony of one's own Lord. Many are the things that are happening and that have happened. But also very often, even in the face of all that happens, man does not reflect. Think about the pandemic. For a year and a half, the world stopped. After a year and a half, after 2 years, everything has passed. As if nothing had happened. The world has continued to do what it used to do before. And behold, then wars broke out. How not to think of all that is written? Even in this behavior of man. In the Apocalypse, all this was also written. The rest of mankind who did not perish because of these scourges, did not renounce the works of his hands. He did not cease to worship demons, idols of gold, of silver, of bronze, of stone and wood. Who can neither see, nor hear, nor walk. He did not even renounce to murder, nor witchcraft, nor fornication, nor stealing. Here is that the scourges arrive. The world, after an initial fear, continues to betray love. It continues to behave, denying God. As if God did not exist. Thinking only of itself, animated only by the spirit of dominance and prevarication over others. Here are the upheavals of nature and heaven referred to. The earth vibrates, the earth makes its voice heard. Natural events strike down. The earth is purified by God's action. To become new, renewed. And so the heavens are renewed. When the Lamb opened sixth seal, I saw that there was a violent earthquake. The sun became black as sackcloth of horsehair. The moon became all similar to blood. The stars of the sky came crashing down over the earth. As when a fig tree whipped by the storm lets the immature figs fall. The sky retreated as a volume that rolls up, and all the mountains and islands were moved from their place. Then the kings of the earth, the great, captains, rich and powerful, and finally every man, slave or free, hid themselves all in the caves, between the cliffs of the mountains. And they said to the mountains, to the cliffs, fall over us and hide us from the face of he who sits on the throne, and from wrath of the Lamb, for the great day of their wrath is come. And who can resist it? Spiritual sense, the sun represents God. The sun that is darkening, because in a house where for centuries that sun shone. Now that sun is no longer. Their God is no longer in that house. And she, who had been called to reflect the light of the sun. Just as the moon reflects the sun, that house, that was supposed to reflect that light, to bring that light to all. Today spreads gloom, darkness, and no longer light. And those who had been called to be stars, stars of that sky, of that house that should have been and remain the heaven of God, They have fallen. They are falling. Here is that great earthquake of which John speaks of in the Apocalypse, when he says that the great city was divided in three. And we all well remember the meditation that was done on this division in three parts: on one side the modernists, on the other side the traditionalists, and then there is this house, where has been preserved and always will preserve the purity of the faith. The modernists have fallen. Traditionalists, if they think they are remaining anchored to that house, carrying on a battle within that house, which cannot find victory, because by now the vast majority of that house is contaminated, are in danger of being swept away along with that house. Today, so many unfortunately wait, but the time to wait has passed. It is time to come out, definitively. Just as John heard, when that mighty voice rose up and said, "Come out of Babylon, my people, come out, people." The people of God, the people made up of those who want to remain faithful, must rebel against a system. And understanding that that system is now withered, rotten, and that inside that house, there is no longer the chance of getting out of it, must raise their gaze, to understand and see God's Son and be guided by the light, that will illuminate their steps, and that will lead them here, to the land of love, where the Son has returned, has descended, to never set again. And to those who do not want to see, to those who do not want to listen, even understanding what is happening, to those who, like the ostrich, put their heads in the ground, I say, raise your head, because otherwise, even you will end up like these stones, that will fall one on top of each other and will remain only rubble, forgotten forever by God. Dear brothers, if we want to live the New Jerusalem, if we want to live God's new heaven, where the Son has risen, and where will be manifested with power the Son of God, who will draw all to himself, we must, just as we were told in the active magisterium, the sacredness of life and man's willingness to substitute himself to God, so entitled, understand, be docile, obedient, and live love. That love which must and is the lever in the heart of God's children. That love that leads us to peer into the heart of the Father. That love that makes us contemplate love made person, which here has descended, to be able to embrace us and lead us into eternity. To those who still have doubts I say, it is all written, and to those who say yes, but these things have always happened in history, I say, reflect, there are two unequivocal signs. Two signs: one is the abomination of desolation, which quotes another evangelist in his gospel and which St. Paul quotes, the one we referred to before. The iniquitous one who goes pointing to himself as God. Certainly, the iniquitous one would never have said, "I am God." It would not have been a deception. But what does this mean? The moment one changes the Word of God, one teaches doctrines that are not the doctrine of Jesus. In that case, one is putting himself in the place of God. Even not saying, one is putting himself in the place of God. And then there is another sign, a cloud, an infant, who descended on a cloud of heaven. It doesn't seem to me that there have been many manifestations. That there have been many manifestations in history in which the Lord descended on a cloud of heaven. A 7-year-old maiden saw Jesus descend on a cloud. What could she know at the age of 7, this young girl have known of Luke's gospel, of Matthew's gospel, in which it talked about Jesus, that would have returned on a cloud from heaven? What could she know? Here is the other sign: Jesus has descended to begin the itinerary of his return. An itinerary that has begun and which will be brought to fulfillment when Christ will manifest all his power and all his glory in the church of Christ. Firmament of the new heaven will shine in a thick darkness, where all those who will look to the firmament of God and look to the star, Mary the star, that shines and will shine, and will follow her, will come before the throne of the King of Kings, and will say to each one, "Come, dear brother, come, dear sister, take possession of that kingdom which I have prepared for you from the foundation of the centuries." And so be it.